My name is John Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's father. For the last 3 years, I've been travelling the world, in particular, most of the time in the UK and Europe, and then 2 monthly trips into tours in the United States. And then now I'm back in the UK for the hearing that was on the 27th, 28th. That's yesterday and the day before.
I just wonder how you think this latest hearing has gone, because I'm struck by the fact that there's been so little press coverage of it. We've had wall to wall about Glasgow, the COP26 this week, but virtually nothing about Julian. And what there's been, I've seen in The Independent yesterday, they published what I thought immediately was a terrific article talking about Jeremy Corbyn saying that Julian has committed no crime and that he should be released. And all of a sudden, over the next few hours, couple of hours, the headline changed to something a bit more innocuous, something that one of the lawyers had said. So it seems almost Orwellian. You know, you've got the journalist writing an article and somebody else, quite who, God knows, has come along and said, "Oh, we don't like the sound of that. It's, legally questionable or whatever." Has Julian committed a crime? Well, of course, we know he hasn't committed any crime, a British crime, and yet he's still in prison. So anyway, how have these hearings gone the last couple of days? I understand Wednesday was the prosecution and the defence on Thursday.
Well, if I could characterise this as a sort of, because it's Halloween or Hallows Day soon, I could characterise this as a sort of zombie prosecution and persecution of Julian. It seems to refuse to die. It's mired in scandal, one after the other, starting with the Crown Prosecuting Service and the Swedish Prosecuting Authority conspiring with each other to keep Julian in the embassy, and Julian's lawyers fighting in Sweden to get the Swedish federal court to advance the case, to instruct the prosecutor to advance the case. This goes on for 4 Swedish prosecutors for 7.5 years. And finally, after the 9th year, the Swedish prosecuting authority retires from the field, embarrassed and disgraced. So then, of course, then the FBI gets itself involved in Iceland and bribes a convicted paedophile and fraudster to give evidence against Julian, which a month or so later, the person concerned recants the evidence in its entirety, and the Icelandic government arrests him and put him in jail for a continuous crime spree, which the FBI guaranteed that he would be immune from persecution from. The next one is the CIA spying on Julian and suborning the UC Global, the security firm that's supposed to look after Julian's security and the security in the embassy. So they bribe them. The next one is that the CIA get together with their geniuses and plan to kill Julian, shoot Julian, have a shootout in the streets of London, shoot the tyres from an aeroplane, or if an aeroplane's trying to take off, or hover a helicopter over an aeroplane that may be rescuing Julian. All of this absurd stuff, which all of a sudden the United Kingdom Secret Services say, you can't do that, fellas. We'll do it for you. And so there's another tremendous scandal bringing just after the disgrace that's heaped on the Swedish Prosecuting Authority, bringing disgrace to the Crown Prosecuting Service and the prosecutors here in the UK. It just you'd think that these 3 elements, like the FBI in Iceland, the the Swedish Prosecuting Authority and Crown Prosecuting Service's conspiracy, the CIA suborning and bribing UC Global, the security firm, then the CIA embarking upon these mad ideas itself with the involvement of MI6. You'd think the thing would just die. And then you add to this teetering mountain of scandal the fact that Julian hasn't committed a crime. He's not a US citizen. So the charges are espionage charges. And then another scandal emerges that in particular the extradition treaty between the United States and the UK specifically mentions not to extradite for political crimes, which, of course, espionage accusation is a political crime. Then you get another layer of scandal that the New York Times, the Washington Post, El País, that's the Spanish newspaper, Le Monde, the French newspaper, Der Spiegel, the German newspaper, and The Guardian, the English newspaper, all concurrently printed exactly the same stuff as Julian did the day before, a few hours before Julian published it and WikiLeaks published it. And it's how it just can't get any madder, Tony, than what these people are going on with. The latest 2 days of hearing were held in the Chief Justice of England and Wales Court, is the most powerful judge in England and Wales. So one would be hoping that the people who administer law in the United Kingdom want to stop this mess and stop the disgrace that's seeping in to the administration of law in the UK. Now, ordinary people, of course, we have busy lives and have to look after our kids and wives and lovers. Ordinary people don't have time to absorb all this stuff. However, people engaged in the administration of other states in the world see it. That's their job, to look at what's happening in the UK and become aware that you can't rely upon the legal administration in the UK. This is a very important matter because there's probably, I don't know how much at the moment, but probably about $1 trillion of contracts written in the city of London each year, and often they fall into disrepute. And having a legal system which has a reputation of being able to fairly adjudicate disputes is vital. It seems to me, Tony, the odds to nothing that to get out of this mess as quickly as possible, the UK, the administration of law in the UK, they must see the light and stop it in its tracks.
What about the scene in the court?
Well, the prosecutor had the first dibs, if you can have the image. There's plenty of really accurate stuff online for people to read, but I sort of just deal with the poetry, and the image is that the prosecutor lives in fairyland, that the United States jail system is okay, and the prosecutor went to the extent of saying that provisions are made for solitary recreation in the cells. Spare me this stuff, solitary recreation. That means you're locked up all the time, you're staring at a wall, you get a pencil to write notes to yourself or something like that. But equally, they have a system in the United States called SAMs, it's Special Administrative Measures, and that's decided by the Attorney General and the CIA. If the Attorney General and the CIA think that you'll reveal a secret or something to another prisoner, they would whack you under SAMs. The SAMS has about 80 prisoners in the United States under its auspices, and they're all in solitary confinement. That there are other means of solitary confinement in the United States. There's about 80,000 people. I mean, there's 2.4 million people in jails in the United States. It's particularly distressing administration of justice and locking that 7 times more people than the United Kingdom up in jails. And those jails are used as slave labour to produce clothing or number plates, at any rate, whatever contract the local local to the jail manufacturing industry can use prisoners for, because they only get paid $4 an hour. So you see the prosecutor living in fairyland and actually cherry picking from the 4 weeks of evidence last September, cherry picking to construct a case which he simply doesn't have. He makes these assertions eloquently, and the structure is that people actually have to take notice of him. The second day, Edward Fitzgerald and Mark Summers, flayed the assertions of James Lewis, the UK prosecutor, that was a relief to hear. They have a summing up, so the prosecutor gets half an hour at the end of the defence's dissertation, and similarly, the defence gets half an hour after the prosecutor's dissertation. They gave the prosecutor an extra time, but he didn't have enough material to fill the time and had to decline the use of that time, such as the quality of the material that he has. But if I could just say that there's plenty of really good commentary online on Twitter. The blow-by-blow account, Kevin Costola and Richard Medhurst, just to name 2. So if people want to follow it in that sort of detail, I deal with the overall of it because I have I'm not a legal mind, and also the poetry of the matter, to see an innocent man now in the 12th year of his arbitrary detention, again in another court case after a deluge of scandal. So that's what I deal with, the insistence that I'll give you a couple more on this as a matter of fact. One of the great inventions of great creations of the English-speaking peoples was in 1207, the Magna Carta, which put a system of laws, a shield, if you want, between the sovereign and the people. And that over the years improved and improved and improved, so that now every nation in the world adopts a system of laws to guide the relationship between the state and the people. But this is, in the case of Julian, just been abandoned. And I think that that's not a good sign for this great and magnificent gift of the English-speaking people. Another thing is that another gift that the English-speaking people made is through Percy Shelley, the poet, where in Prometheus Unbound, he illuminated for us the relationship between freedom and knowledge. If you to get freedom, you need knowledge. And this is in Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and all of those people who constitute WikiLeaks. That's what they do. They bring knowledge of the actions of corporations and states so that you can evaluate for yourself what your state or what your corporations are doing, and make decisions for yourself and your family and your community, and you enable yourself to have erudite, knowledgeable conversations between each other to see what's cooking and how to go about life. These are vital things. Another thing is that after the 1945 catastrophe wars, the people of the world got together and built a thing called the United Nations, wherein states, through law, could sort out their differences, and hopefully where they came into competition, to work out how that competition could be benefit to both parties, a win-win situation, to use a current aphorism, win-win. So that has fallen into disrepute as well in the case of Julian Assange. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention on the 18th of February 2018 February, said that Julian was arbitrarily detained. The United Kingdom protested. That protest failed. Then the United Kingdom just said, the Crown Prosecuting Service said, well, we're not interested in what the UN says. Then the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture, Professor Nils Melzer, his Professor of Law at Glasgow University, said that Julian was a victim of psychological torture over a period of 10 years of smears and arbitrary detention. His report is derided in court. It was derided in court the day before yesterday by the Crown Prosecuting Service prosecutor, James Lewis. This great thing, the United Nations, ought to be treated with respect. And the next one is the Conventions of Asylum. Julian, dragged out of the embassy as an asylee. Duncan, the minister at the time, writes an autobiography boasting of how he'd managed to bribe the president of Ecuador to contravene the Conventions of Asylum and not go through the process of withdrawing asylum from Julian, just say that, it's fine, you can go in and arrest him. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible thing to do to these great civil artifacts that took the catastrophe of the Second World War to build, and then those very states that built them abandoned them. It's just not good.
Well, it's probably partly because the generation in charge now doesn't actually remember war, and it maybe doesn't even bother reading its history books. But look, one of the things that got me interested in journalism originally was a series by Duncan Campbell called Secret Society, which the BBC broadcast back in the 1980s, 1987, I think it was. Yeah. And this whole thing of secrecy, I mean, he was looking, for example, there was even the BBC offices, I remember, in Scotland were raided by Special Branch to take all of the tapes and everything as they were making the programme. And, that was the sort of TV that was really good fun to watch. And I thought this is a great and interesting institution. But secrecy, I think, is it Carl Jung that said the maintenance of secrets is like a psychic poison that alienates their possessor from the community. And this whole thing of secrecy is one of the things that Julian was doing his best in the public interest, note, to penetrate, really. And it's actually what journalists should do. And it's now what journalists generally don't do. So there are all sorts of lines that they don't cross, like, oh, gosh, my editor might not like this or whatever. They know that there's a massive area and a growing area that they have no jurisdiction whatsoever, and they better keep their mouths shut. Now, that used to be really just kind of, national security and military intelligence. But since the Thatcher era, in the 1980s, so much has been privatized of our infrastructure that we're now looking at private businesses covering commercial confidentiality with a massive amount, and of course, massive contracts that we're now used to run the entire nation, that they are also secret. So what Julian's done is so important. I think personally that, one of his most important revelations through WikiLeaks, and what a terrific organisation and operation it was. There's nothing really like doing that nowadays. Is this Vault 7 back in 2017, which revealed all sorts of things. This is all kind of Orwellian crazy stuff, but we were all amazed to see that some of our fears about technology were actually true. Things like being able to hack aircraft in order to bring them down, being able to hack cars in order to force car crashes. And I think it was 2013 that we had the US journalist who'd written a book about the generals in Afghanistan, or one particular general. He finds his car accelerating in LA up to 80 miles an hour. And there's a bit of police footage because he shot past a police car where you can clearly see he's got his foot on the brakes, as he's doing 80 miles an hour and accelerating. And then the car swerves and crashes into a tree and kills him as an investigative journalist out of the way. Also, simple things like being able to hack into a locomotive to take over control of it from the driver and crash a train. All these things being actually part of a program by the Central Intelligence Agency in order to carry out covert assassinations. Now, this is the sort of thing that the world needs to know about. Certainly, domestic citizens need to know about. And I would, consider that, since the military adventures in the Middle East by NATO, by the US mainly, and Britain have hit the buffers in Syria, that much of this machinery, because they realise that they can't really take on the Russians and the Chinese, that much of this machinery is starting to be turned on us, John.
Yeah, I see that. I'm not a technician, and I do understand a little bit about Vault 7. But what the narrative I like to use about secrets and about the revelations that WikiLeaks, and in this case Chelsea Manning, because Julian is only charged with those original ones, not Vault 7. Okay, is this, that when the revelations came, the Iraq War files, the Afghan War files, the Guantanamo Bay files, slowly, and the cables, slowly, the information therein and the wretchedness of the behaviour of officials slowly seeped into the consciousness in one way or another of the populations in the West, in the United Kingdom, United States, Australia. And this results in the people losing interest in supporting these wars. And in the United States, they invented out of the mass, it wasn't top down, a statement: never ending wars. The wars had to end because the support for them disappeared. It just drifted away. It wasn't a phenomenon of people marching in the street. It's a phenomenon of us withdrawing support in one way or another. Nobody's interested in these wars. And so they end. Now they're out of Afghanistan in another great catastrophe of strategic and organised withdrawal of people from Afghanistan, a disaster. Didn't even tell the United Kingdom. And, shake your head in shame that the United Kingdom running around the place saying we're great friends, and then not decently involved in the withdrawal of their troops from Afghanistan. The withdrawal from Iraq, it's over, it's gone. The Guantanamo Bay, every other day you see a note in the paper that they're trying to somehow place the prisoners in there and close the place. This boil, this on on the face of the law administration. So that's how I read the narrative of the revelation of secrets and the ability of us to evaluate what these states are doing in our name or what they're not doing. With Vault 7, of course, the manipulation of our lives, it takes another course, and that's the digital course. We can spend an hour or so talking about the digitalization of economy and our lives.
Yeah, well, yeah, we probably one of the things that is one of the most notable is this whole thing about TV spying on us. I mean, how Orwellian is that? Amazing. But anyway, look, let's get back to Julian again, because
yes,
he's the main concern here. And I see, there's an amazing mural in Berlin of him with his press gear being nailed to the cross, which it seems that echoes right around the world. And of course, the fact that has such resonance is absolutely damning. And as you said, who could trust Britain again if they're prepared to carry on with this appalling crucifixion? Anyway, what about him himself and his appearance? How is he? And
he didn't look he didn't look too good during the hearing. On the first day, he came into the video booth at Belmarsh for an hour and then disappeared, and then came back a little late, in the afternoon. But yesterday he wasn't there at all, and I believe that increased his medication, so he's a bit down at the moment. Well, more than a bit, but anyway, that's his circumstance. He's lost a bit of weight. I'll know more on the 2nd and the 4th when I, get an opportunity to go and say hello. But yeah, it's not.
I mean, what's that sort of procedure in a nutshell? What's that sort of procedure like in Belmarsh? I presume you've.
It's a maximum security prison. It's designed for terrorists in particular. 36% of the population there are rapists of one sort or another. The procedure is that you make a booking and then you take everything out of your pocket except notes, not silver, except notes totaling maximum £20. They have a cafeteria inside. I don't think the cafeteria's used since COVID. Then you go through 4 gates, and each gate there's a security check, and then then the X-ray machine, and then a physical tap down, and then your shoes. You take off your shoes. You're not allowed to have any paper. We're not allowed to have anything except a maximum £20 note. You take your belt off. So.
And how much time do you get to spend with Julian?
Usually about 45 minutes. Yeah. They say it's an hour and a half, but it never is. Sometimes they forget to bring Julian down. They have to remind them.
Well, look,
it's pretty grim, It's a maximum security prison. So anything that you can imagine that they would do to make life as constrained as possible so that there's no risks taken. Also, the theatre of no risks. You go through these electronic portals, you search, then you x-rayed, and then you searched again, and then you take your shoes off to see if there's any paper in them. All of those, the theatre of oppression and intimidation is complete. Sometimes a prisoner in the meeting room will go a bit nuts over some sort of frustration or other, and 6 guards will push him to the ground, generally indicate to him that, anything outside of the law, anything outside of the rules or regulations is going to be hit real hard. So that's the circumstances in a maximum security prison.
Okay, and where do we go from here? When are we going to hear a result from this hearing?
The Chief Judge didn't indicate the amount of time. I've been told December. Another lawyer said January, and then last night a lawyer rang me up and said, it should be only 2 weeks. So, Tony, I don't know.
We'll better watch this space, John. Just like to say thank you ever so much for joining us.
Tony, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So that's John Shipton there, Julian Assange's father, speaking exclusively to me this morning after 2 days of hearings on Wednesday and Thursday this week. Martin, what do you make of what is there anything you'd like to pick out? I noticed you scribbling away there about what he was saying. I think one of the most important things he's saying is that, look, what's happening is the combatants of the Second World War who put the UN together are now just tearing the whole thing up. They've decided no. And, of course, that must mean more war, maybe another world war even.
Well, I mean, this is the underlying politics of the situation. Just to pick up a couple of things which he didn't mention is that there's a Spanish security firm which is...
Well, he did talk about UC Global, yeah.
Yeah, well, they basically are... The Baltasar Garzón, who's the activist lawyer from Spain, is trying to get them prosecuted, because what they were trying to do was listen into Assange's discussions with his lawyer.
That's right. And I mean, John, to be fair to John, what he's saying is that there are other journalists who will go into the minutiae like this, like, so for example, Richard Medhurst, who you'll find at www.richardmedhurst.com, doing that sort of report for RT, and he's a freelancer working for RT, etc. So you can find, the details of this, but he did talk about that, and also about this whole business in Iceland, and all this evidence which was just completely fabricated. Well, we'll see what the judge makes of that. Of course, one of the major problems here, as he was talking about Magna Carta, etc., is that there doesn't seem to be, not only is there no crime being committed on British soil at all, and that the laws of asylum have been torn up at the Ecuadorian embassy, but there's no jury.
No. And that's because it's an extradition hearing, you don't get juries.
Why not? Well, I mean, it's a very important case.
Indeed. It's a test case in every possible way you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there really seems to be being cooked up. But anyway, what else did you want to bring up?
Well, the only other thing is the political situation in Ecuador, where Lenin Moreno was originally part of Rafael Correa's administration, and he was elected. Rafael Correa.
There's been a lot of change in politics since Julian went into the embassy. Yes. Ecuador was fairly sympathetic. Now it's not. Yeah,
well, in actual fact, the politics in Ecuador have changed again. So you've now got the left back in power in Ecuador. And under those circumstances, they probably wouldn't have allowed the British to go into the embassy. But, of course, it's too late now. He's out of the embassy and he's in. And, of course, when he was in the embassy, loads of people were saying, well, why didn't he just come out? Nothing will happen to him. And, of course, he was right. As soon as they went into the embassy, and then they tried to extradite him to the US for under espionage charges. So his desire to go into the embassy was perfectly straightforward. And, of course, lots of mainstream opinion is still of the opinion that, that he was just a refugee from justice, etc., etc. What's extraordinary is that apart from the usual suspects, the mainstream liberal elite in this country have washed their hands of him, even though this is clearly a landmark case for civil liberties in this country. And many people are just walking by on the other side of the road pretending they haven't seen it.
Your namesake, actually, Mark Summers QC, one of Assange's attorneys, contended that this was the first time the US had sought the assistance of a UK court in obtaining jurisdiction over a person that the US government agency had planned to poison or assassinate. That is worthy of an investigation in relation to the assurances, Summers added, referring to the pledges involving how they would treat Assange. So there's the people that were trying to kill him saying, it's okay, you can trust him in our care.
Well, that's right. And in any case, why aren't the people who talked about killing him being prosecuted? It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, the total inversion of what you might call normal legal principles, and the complete silence of the mainstream media and their acolytes about all of this.
If you want to get into the minutiae of this, I mean, but the idea was that they were, in a way, they were hoping that Julian Assange was going to try and escape from the Ecuadorian embassy, and that they were going to be they were going to get involved in some sort of gunfight with him and kill him, deliberately kill him.
Yeah.
So that is an assassination.
Absolutely.
On British soil by the United States. I mean, this sort of thing is actually coming out a little bit in that trial, but not elsewhere, generally speaking.
And of course, what underlying all of this is that they do assassinate people all the time, and that they also run secret prisons all over the world where people are tortured, where there's no legal basis for what's going on whatsoever. Nobody has any right to see a lawyer or anything. And this is where we're going, is towards an authoritarian, totalitarian state.
I would call it gangsterism.
Well, it is gangsterism, of course it is. I mean, America sees themselves as the world's policeman and the world's gangster.
Also, I was quite interested to see yesterday the Independent published an article about Assange's hearing, one of the few papers that bothered, which talked about Jeremy Corbyn, and the headline was saying that Jeremy Corbyn was calling for Assange's release and saying that he hadn't committed a crime. Which was quite nice of Corbyn. He was down there at the demonstrations, I believe, on Wednesday or Thursday. But he was certainly a part of the group calling for Assange's release, but then making an absolutely clear statement that the guy's committed no crime and that he should be released. Anyway, within about an hour or so, one of the subs or the editors got hold of this article on the Independent website and completely changed the headline, got rid of any reference to Jeremy Corbyn or to the fact that Julian Assange had committed no crime and should be released.
Well, this is a bit
Orwellian, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's what you've got here is John Pilger obviously has been very much on Assange's side, but you've got, hardly any MPs. It's basically the Corbynite MPs who've stood by Assange. And you feel like saying, well, where are the Liberal Democrats? Do you think this is okay?
Where is the Labour Party?
Where is the right wing of the Labour Party? Indeed. And of course, by their silence, they're showing their complicity with all of this. And it's pretty clear what side they are on. And it's not the side of justice, is it?
Well, one of the things that John Shipton talked about there was this whole business of the sort of these US prisons being used as labour camps. Now, this is a little bit chilling, isn't it? We know that the Nazis had all these labour camps in the Second World War, and it's something which is creeping into our prisons across the world, but it's very big in the United States. Big companies rather like the idea that they can get things made virtually for free, very, very cheaply, by prison labour.
Indeed.
And it's an incentive, of course, to incarcerate more and more people.
That's right. And of course, don't forget also in the US, if you're incarcerated, you lose your vote forever. So by putting lots of young black men in prison, you make damn sure they're never going to be able to vote against you.
I remember looking at some evidence. Gosh, this is back in the 1990s now. There's a horrific photograph of Heinrich Himmler looking at a concentration camp in the 1930s, a labour camp in Nazi Germany, and stood by the side of him is John D. Rockefeller, one of the original Rockefellers, looking at this saying, isn't this great? What we've done is we've managed to lock all these people up and we're getting them to work for virtually nothing. Now, that seems to me one of the things that's at the heart and the root of the wishes of the Anglo-Zionist empire, you can call them a New World Order, whatever, is to criminalise and incarcerate people so that they can be basically working for them for virtually nothing in prisons. And criminalising, we've got this whole thing at the moment with Priti Patel attempting to criminalise travellers and gypsies, so generating a whole new class of tens of thousands of people who are going to become criminals just for being who they are.
Yes, and of course in the US, this is all related to attempts to control the political system, so that they're going to have voter ID, gerrymandering, so that you get people off the electoral rolls, and then you can make the districts favour your party, and this is an ongoing. You can see the current Tory government their playbook is the Republican playbook in the US, which is basically to keep down the level of people that are registered to vote, particularly poorer people, to change the boundaries of the electoral, of the various electoral constituencies to favour your party, and, basically to rig the whole thing in every possible way that you can get away with. which of course is exactly how Northern Ireland was run until everything exploded in their faces in 1969.
Well, one of the best reporters on the the actual hearing, because this is an appeal against that decision from the previous hearing, and one of the reporters was Craig Murray. In fact, he was in court every day. He did a fantastic load of reports. Former ambassador, British ambassador. It's rather handy that he's actually been incarcerated himself now under the spurious charges from apparently jigsaw identifying people, which is very, very difficult to do. But anyway, the Scottish courts have jailed Craig Murray so that he can't report on this Assange trial.
Yeah, well, there's an ongoing campaign, is there not?
Political prisoners.
Against people that they don't like. It couldn't be clearer.
Anyway, the full version of that interview I did this morning will be up on our show page tonight at thisweek.org.uk. You do wonder, I mean, if this carries on, this hideous miscarriage of justice going on with Julian Assange and the destruction of journalism in Britain, whether, you know, they're really almost picking a fight with the masses of the population, the elite in London. And, you know, at some point, people are going to say, we're going to have to bring these corrupt institutions down.
Well, they're getting away with it because a large number of people aren't that bothered.
Well,
they should be, but they're not.
It's the press that aren't bothered, even though actually it's the press which are mainly affected. But, you know, it's quite clearly they've set themselves on a collision course with their own populations.
Well, not yet.
Well, they have. By what they're doing to Assange is they're
totally
heading in that direction.
I totally agree. I mean,
they're making it absolutely clear that they are up for fighting their own populations over basic justices.
Well, look,
the criminal justice system.
We've just passed through the House of Commons 43% of the vote, a majority of 80, and they've said that the police, the military, and the intelligence services are above the law. What an extraordinary thing to pass. Why should these institutions, which are there to protect the law, be above the law? And that is, you know, clear evidence of their intent to break the law. And, of course, why they've brought it through, and the Tories have passed it through, is because they've been breaking the law for years in Northern Ireland and elsewhere, in organising assassinations, killing people, and imprisoning them wrongly, and so on and so forth. This is what's been going on. And, you know, many people have just basically, they've closed their eyes, they've closed their ears, and they're not really taking on board. They think, well, it's nothing to do with me. These are, you know, exceptional people. But, of course, once they've established the principles, then they will be able to do this going indefinitely into the future unless people stand up to them.
Will they stand up? And will Julian Assange, do you think, ultimately be extradited? Apparently we're going to hear the decision of the judge. Well, as he says in the longer version of the interview, which will be up on our show page at thisweek.org.uk later, he says within a couple of weeks. He's also been told maybe December, maybe January.
Well, we shall have to see. I think they've got themselves, I mean, shocking and horrifying as all this is, they've got themselves into a bit of a mess now because they don't really want to extradite him. Because, for example, if he died in prison in the US, that would definitely, you know, have some impact in public opinion here in Britain. And there isn't actually a legal basis to extradite him, so they're basically making stuff up. And in many ways, it would be so much better for them if they could just let him go. But of course, they can't do that because of the publicity that's been generated now. They're in a no-win situation. But of course, he's in a worse no-win situation.
One of the most fascinating points I think that John made there was about this whole business of basically bringing down any kind of credibility of the British justice system in world markets, so that people making contracts with the UK, they can see that there's an enormous amount of political interference in those contracts, and they're not going to get a fair deal if the contract goes into dispute. So this is actually quite another quite interesting aspect to all of this. So this is, a lot of people are watching this to see, can the British deliver justice? If not, we don't want to deal with them. Well,
no, I think he's whistling in the dark there. A lot of these corporations bring these kind of cases to the British courts because they know that they are fixed and that they're going to, you know, for example, people who are trying to chase money that's owed them by developing countries, and therefore they will not be deterred. Those kind of criminal litigants will not be deterred by this. In actual fact, it possibly gives them more confidence that the courts will find in their favour. But of course, what's actually happening is that, you know, the rule of law in the widest sense is being completely undermined.
Well, in the backdrop to all of this, we've got a horrific court case which has finally come to an end this week. The British teen who killed women as part of a satanic pact. Now, we often get told, oh, this is all just balderdash. Actually, the fact of the matter is that there are satanic cults out there. They use things like goth groups, etc., to try and lure people in. Harry Potter witchcraft type organisations in order to get them into more and more hardcore, nasty cults. And I suppose this is a sort of black magic type of a cult, whereas many of these things are more innocuous. People can get lured in as a result. But anyway, he apparently has been Danielle Hussein, 90 years old, stabbed Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman in a London park last year. Police tracked him down through DNA and uncovered a handwritten pledge to a demonic entity called King Lucifuge Rofokal.